You don't like this idea, do you, of a windfall tax? What is a Conservative Chancellor doing, hinting that he may be about to introduce one?
Well, he shouldn't be, and he's clearly wrong, and it's not government policy. We already charge double the corporation tax rate for getting our own oil and gas out. What the Chancellor has to remember is that he is going to have a tax bonanza if we get more oil and gas out domestically, instead of paying all that money away to Saudi Arabia or Qatar or wherever. Whereas if he deters more of this investment, we'll be worse off. You can put taxes up and end up with less money, and that is exactly what a windfall tax would do. We need the jobs here, we need the tax here, we need the money here. The way to do that is to work with the industry and get more oil and gas out. And I thought you gave a very good introduction. I've been campaigning to keep the lights on. I've been campaigning to say that we shouldn't pack up the coal stations, which are there as a reserve for when the wind doesn't blow, and that we need to get much more of our own gas out of the North Sea because A, the Treasury will make money out of it, B, it's less CO2 than bringing in LNG, and C, we need it in order to keep warm and keep industry turning.
Victoria Hewson, great to see you back on the show. We know that the profit forecasts of big energy sector companies, they're up by almost a third this year, by about 20% next year. Chancellor Geoffrey Howe, back in the early 80s, introduced a windfall tax on the banks. The Tories have done it in the past. Why not now?
Well, you made the very good point that purely by virtue of making these additional profits, the energy companies will be paying more tax. They already pay a higher level of tax on income from the North Sea oil and gas fields anyway. And so there's no real sort of justification here for treating the additional profits from the rises in energy prices as a sort of windfall. This is just the way the energy markets work. It's not something surprising or unusual, which would be the usual justification for a windfall tax, to the extent that politicians try and give them sort of a principled justification when it's really just a way of trying to grab more revenues in really quite a populist way. And it is quite disappointing, actually, that the current government's reflexes to all the sort of cost of living problems, as well as the problems that we are experiencing with instability in the energy market, seems to be more intervention and more tax, rather than looking at the root causes for why these problems are occurring, which in many cases are actually caused by government policies introducing the insecurity into the energy market.
Malcolm, let's go to you, Malcolm Grimston. So John Redwood, former Cabinet Minister, Victoria Hewson, extremely well-regarded analyst and regulator and researcher. They're against this windfall tax. What do you think? Do you buy this argument, Malcolm, that a windfall tax would lead to less investment, would worsen our energy security, could lead to energy prices for motorists and households and firms to go up?
I think it's pretty much inevitable. The investment horizon for investments in heavy energy is very long indeed, probably of 20 or 30 years. And during that 20 or 30 years, there are periods, and we've seen this over the last decade, when the companies don't make very much money, so there's no incentive to invest. That has to be balanced by a period when prices are high that tells these companies, OK, now is the time that we should invest. And if the companies don't do that, then in the longer term, prices continue to increase because at its basis, prices go up because supply isn't meeting demand. If you don't invest in the capacity to increase future supply, then you tie yourselves into high prices in the long term. The Blair government introduced a windfall tax on the electricity companies in 1997. Although it wasn't directly the cause, we should remember that by 2002, the electricity supply industry in this country was basically bankrupt. It stopped investing, and some of the problems that we face today from supply, we can track back to that sort of period, the early years of this century. So I'm very sceptical about the wisdom. It looks politically attractive, but if it's not for times of very high profits, then companies don't invest. As I understand it, the Chancellor is saying he would only consider this if the companies weren't making the necessary investment. That's better than just a blind windfall tax. But of course, that raises questions of what are the criteria? How can a company decide if it's going to be let off the tax or not?
Vicky Price, let's turn to you now. Regular On the Money viewers know, because we mention it from time to time, that you used to be one of the people who ran the government economic service. You were a very senior economist within Whitehall. You've been involved in extremely important policy discussions. We've got some really big guns here today lined up against this windfall tax. Not, from right politics, energy expertise, a very serious analyst from the IEA. What do you think?
Well, I can understand where they're coming from completely. And I have to also declare an interest in the sense that I used to work for an oil company myself. So I used to do a lot of scenario planning and looked at what was going on in Europe. And of course, it's absolutely true that when prices, for example, come down, they stop investing, close everything. And when prices start going up, they start investing again. But of course, the climate had changed, by which I don't just mean the temperature had gone up.
Yeah.
In terms of investing in oil and gas fields. As we know full well, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, has been saying we shouldn't invest anymore. And this government itself had not been particularly keen on looking at allowing firms to invest a lot more in this area because we were moving towards new targets, net zero and so on. But now, of course, we realise that we do need some of that investment. It's absolutely true that you need to incentivise firms to do so. But it is nevertheless the case that even though these companies are indeed, in theory, paying an awful lot more in terms of tax because the tax rate is higher for them, they haven't actually been paying very much at all because they have also been able to claim an awful lot of money back from the taxpayer on decommissioning those North Sea oil fields, which they're not going to be using any longer. So a lot of the profits that's coming now, it's coming by them not doing anything very much at all, not investing, maybe investing in decommissioning, if you like, not really investing in the North Sea to any extent, but just making this extra profit. But as we've been hearing, it takes a long time for those investments to come through. So the idea that we're going to let them off the hook now, that they're making these profits without actually, doing anything particularly special, because they're going to be investing in the future, you have no idea whether that's going to happen. They're all announcing plans to do so.
Would you advise ministers now to go for a windfall tax if you were still one of the most influential economists in Whitehall?
Well, I was around when various windfall taxes were considered and, in fact, imposed. Other countries are doing that, like Italy, for example. I think we're in a place right now.
The Spanish as well are introducing one.
The Spanish are introducing it. The Italians have done it, as we said.
But isn't that what makes Britain different? We don't do retrospective taxation.
But we do.
This is retrospective taxation.
It wouldn't be retrospective necessarily because, of course, they made losses the year before.
OK.
So we have to take into account the losses they made, the profits now, and the percentage that is suggested now is going to be only raising a little bit, if you like. But given that we are in the middle of this serious cost of living crisis, then yes, my recommendation would be go ahead and do something.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.